Hi, I'm Ruben Saltzman with Structure Tech Home Inspections. Today we're going to talk all things asbestos and how it relates to home inspections. So as a home inspector, I can tell you that a lot of people who buy older homes are concerned about asbestos, and rightfully so. Asbestos can cause asbestosis, cancer, mesothelioma. I think that's about it. It's bad stuff. You don't want to be breathing asbestos fibers. And the symptoms of doing this can take somewhere between like 20 to 40 years. So you could be doing it for a long time and not even knowing that it's happening. So it's understandable that people are concerned about this. However, it's not realistic to buy an old house and have an expectation that it's going to be asbestos free. Asbestos has been used in, I think the number is over 3,000 building products. I mean, just about any product you can think of. We had an industrial hygienist come out and teach a class to our local home inspector chapter. And at the end of it, I think he could have saved some time and just started the class by saying this: if a material is not made of wood or metal, it may contain asbestos. That's how much asbestos you got out there. It's in just about anything you can think of. So from a home inspection perspective, because of this, home inspection standards of practice specifically disclaim the identification of asbestos, or really, to take it one step further, of environmental hazards, one of those being asbestos. So as a home inspector, I don't need to say anything about it. I can be looking at something right in front of me and I know it contains asbestos, and I don't have any obligation to say anything about it. Yeah, so let that sink in for a sec. Now, having said that, every home inspector I know who is worth their salt, if they see stuff and they know it's an asbestos-containing product, they're probably going to say something about it. And I'm going to cover some of the most common items that we find in homes that contain asbestos. And I'm going to talk about why these things matter and what we say about them. Most of it is not because it's a health hazard. Usually it's for some other reason. But let's dig into it here. First, we're going to start with my most recent blog and video topic, which was on transite asbestos flues. Now, this is those cement-looking things that take exhaust gases up and out of the house. They don't pose any type of health hazard when it comes to asbestos. I'm not concerned about asbestos fibers being easily released from any of these materials. It's fine in that department. The only reason I'm concerned about those is because the flues collapse in on themselves. I mean, it's a bad product, and it has nothing to do with the fact that asbestos is in there. That's just coincidental. So that's number one. Number two is going to be a very similar product, and this is called transite asbestos sub-slab ductwork. And basically it's the same material. It's cement and asbestos laid underneath your home in these big pipes that distribute warm air throughout the basement. And they got this name, transite asbestos, because that's the material that was used. And then after a short period of time, they stopped using transite asbestos and they started using PVC for the sub-slab ductwork, but the name kind of stuck. Anyway, I'm getting on a tangent. Bottom line is, we are not concerned about this material from a health perspective. I'm always concerned about water getting into those ducts, but that's the same whether it's PVC or transite asbestos. Always concerned about water there. But really, the asbestos is tightly contained in these fibers. It's not going to be easily released. Even if you were to hire a company to do duct cleaning, that duct cleaning action is not going to be enough to release fibers into the air. So really, we have zero concerns from a health perspective when we come across transite sub-slab heating ducts. Man, that's a mouthful. It's a lot for me to think through and get right. Sorry, I'm going slowly here to make sure I get it right. Okay, another one is going to be insulation on boilers and gravity furnaces. When you've got these old heating appliances in your basement, they're typically really big appliances, and they'll be insulated with this white fibrous looking stuff all over. I mean, they just smear this insulation on all over the place. And you know, you don't know 100% for certain that it's going to contain asbestos, but for me, it's more like 95% certain it contains asbestos. You should just make an assumption. When you got an old boiler or a really old gravity furnace, it's all wrapped in white stuff, probably has asbestos. Now, most of that stuff is pretty well contained. It's not going to become easily released in the air. And I keep saying that, I keep using that phrase. Let me share a new term. It's called friable. Friable means the asbestos fibers can be easily released into the air. I'm going to start saying that instead of easily released into the air. So these old boilers and old furnaces usually don't have fibers that are friable, but if you're going to replace them, if you hire an HVAC contractor to come out and say, hey, give me a new boiler, they're going to say, no can do. First, you need to hire an abatement company to come in, tent off the basement, seal this all off, put the basement under negative pressure, so if there's any holes in our seal, that air is going to come in and not leak out into the house. All these safety procedures, and it's going to take them maybe a day or two to get all this done, dismantle that appliance, and safely remove it. So it's a lot of extra work, a lot of extra time and money that needs to happen if you're going to replace one of these appliances that's all covered in asbestos. So because of that, we definitely mention it to our clients during a home inspection and say, hey, just want you to know it's probably an asbestos wrap. I'm not concerned about your safety, but it's going to be a bigger deal when you got to replace that appliance. So that's old furnaces and boilers. Another one kind of in the similar vein is a lot of forced air furnace ductwork will have asbestos wrap on it, asbestos insulation. And it's going to be this white papery looking stuff. And you'll find it typically at joints in the ductwork. That may contain, well, it almost surely contains asbestos. You know, I'm not testing for it, but I've heard pretty much all of it does. And the big thing there is leave it alone. It's not going to be easily released. It's not going to be found inside of the ductwork. It's going to be on the outside of the duct. So I don't have any big concerns about it, but if you're having anything moved, any work done, you'd want to have it professionally removed / abated. That would be the right course of action there. Another material is cement asbestos siding. Now, this stuff looks a lot like wood shake siding, cedar shake siding, but it's a more cement product and it will contain asbestos. We have no concerns about this stuff. The only way that the fibers would be released into the air is by someone taking an angle grinder to it or you know, a Sawzall or something like that and really trying to cut this material. By itself, the material just breaking, it's not going to release asbestos fibers into the air. And even if it does, it's outdoors. So what's the big concern here? Now, I do bring it up because I've heard that some insurance companies don't like this stuff. And because of that, we do make a note of it. We identify the type of material when we do an inspection on a house that has this type of siding, but that's as far as we go. Another asbestos-containing material, known asbestos-containing material, is 9x9 floor tiles. These things surely contain asbestos. Pretty much any time you see a 9x9 floor tile, just make the assumption that it has asbestos. And same thing goes with the mastic that holds it in place. That stuff surely contains asbestos too. Now, once you step it up to 12x12 tiles, you probably don't have asbestos, but it's not a guarantee. Some 12x12 tiles can contain asbestos too. Now, what's the concern with this? Basically, nothing. The asbestos is well contained within this material. It's not friable. Even if you take an angle grinder to it, you're probably not going to be releasing asbestos fibers into the air. But the reason we do bring this up from a home inspection perspective is because big box retailers are really scared of this material. They will not install new floor coverings over 9x9 tiles. So we've had some clients come back to us and say, hey, I tried to get so-and-so, this big retailer, to come out and put carpet over it, and they wouldn't do it. They said I had to get it abated, and it's going to cost this much money. And we kind of shrug. We go, well, yeah, that's their decision. It doesn't mean that you have a hazardous product. It just means that you've got something that people are paranoid about. That's really what it is. It's paranoia causing paranoia. So no big concerns over 9x9 floor tiles, but if you have them, be aware that it might be tough to get somebody to put something new over the top of them. Another one we find commonly is on boiler pipes. Every once in a blue moon, we'll find this asbestos insulation on water pipes too, but it's almost always on boiler pipes. And it's this white fibrous looking stuff. If you look at it, if you look at a cut section on the end, it looks like you're looking at cardboard fibers. It has a very similar cellular structure to it. That stuff surely contains asbestos. Now again, you got to test to know 100% for certain, but from a home inspection perspective, we would say that this is a known asbestos containing product. What do we do when we see it? Well, when it all looks good and pristine and fine, I don't say anything about it. So it's not necessarily a hazard, but when it could become, when it's friable, there's that term, when it's friable, easily released into the air, that's when we're concerned about. There was one house, I remember I walked in, I opened the door, take a look around, it's an old house, I look up and I see that as the door opened, it scraped all of these, all this boiler pipe insulation. I surely released 1 million fibers into the air, and I'm just in the air, in the room, breathing all of it. What am I going to do today? Part of being a home inspector, take those risks. But what you're looking at here, this is friable asbestos. And there's 2 things we'd recommend as a home inspector. Number 1, have somebody come in and remove it, have it abated. Or number 2, have it encapsulated. Have someone paint a bunch of high-tech goop all over the stuff and make sure that it's not going to become easily released into the air. Somehow I like using more words than one concise word. I've learned that about myself just now. I can't say friable. Okay, and then last one I'll discuss. This is probably the biggest, baddest one that really is a safety concern, would be vermiculite insulation. It's this really light, fluffy stuff. It almost kind of looks shiny, and you'll find this in attics built, well, they used it in attics somewhere between the mid-30s up through about the mid-80s. There's a big range. So if a house was in existence during that time, you may have vermiculite insulation in the attic. And we don't find this stuff by just going in the attic and popping our head up and looking around. No. We find this by popping our head up and then moving a little bit of insulation so we can see what's underneath the existing insulation. Because it's usually not just vermiculite by itself. It's usually vermiculite buried under some other newer material. And the concern with vermiculite insulation is that, just someone sneezing in the attic is enough to release like a bazillion fibers into the air, and then you could breathe it, and it takes a really long time for that stuff to settle. I should do a separate video just on vermiculite insulation. There's a lot to talk about with that one topic, but the short and sweet version of it for this video is that it's one of the most concerning materials out there. It contains some of the nastiest asbestos fibers, and there's a lawsuit, a big lawsuit against the W.R. Grace Company, and there's a trust set up, and there's money out there if you own a home that has vermiculite insulation in the attic. And our advice there would be to go to the website where they've got a settlement for this, and you can see what your rights are if you have it, and see how you might be able to pursue confirmation that this really is the material that I'm getting you all whipped up about. So you can click on this link below to get more information about that. And as far as other materials in homes, there's a ton of other stuff where you might have asbestos that I didn't cover. And I'm talking about ceiling texture, popcorn ceilings, I'm talking about linoleum, I'm talking about countertops, insulation on wires, spray applied insulation in old buildings, gypsum, drywall tape, drywall mud. The list goes on and on. I'm not going to list everything because, well, it'd get boring. I'd be here all day. But there's a ton of stuff where you may have asbestos, and it's not realistic to buy an older home and have this expectation that it's going to be asbestos free. You're surely going to have some asbestos somewhere. It's not the end of the world. Talk to your home inspector about any concerns you have, and hopefully your home inspector should be able to give you a lot of direction on whether these are things that you need to be concerned about or it's just typical old house stuff. Okay, that wraps it up. That's all I've got to share on asbestos today. I could probably talk your ear off about it, but I'm not trying to make a 1-hour video. All right, thank you so much for watching. Take care.